you all hear me if I speak this loud? Yeah. I'm not a mic person, so I prefer to go without if possible. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Right. Chris and I met on a fair day in early autumn when we were 16. We were playing football together, and the late afternoon sun was reflecting off his blonde, curly locks. We knew it was meant to be when he had just finished off a beautiful passing move with a screaming low drive into the corner of the goal. I referred to it as a Carlos Alberto, and he gave me a knowing glance. It was a knowing glance we would go on to share countless times during our relationship together. その後、2年間、oh, sorry, that's Japanese, sorry, I've been out there a while. We would spend the next 2 years getting to know one another intimately while studying at Aquinas College, a sixth form college located in one of the few leafy areas of Stockport. This was the era of Friday nights out on the town with a fake NUS card, wearing the obligatory silky finish pink Ben Sherman shirt, jeans and black shoes with a silver buckle. Chris and I would join, but only to avoid complete marginalisation from the mainstream. We would then sneak out of whichever god-awful nightclub we had been dragged to and return to either of our houses, fire a sly kebab, whack on the computer and play FIFA until the early dawn. When I think of the character traits that first attracted me to Chris back then, I'm drawn to the following three: intellect, cordiality, and fairness. The first of these, intellect. Yes, he can be a bit of a smart ass at times, but in terms of intellect, Chris blows the rest out of the water. He's one of the few people I know who can intellectualise football. He has the ability to turn a back-to-the-walls performance by Stockport County into a metaphor for the proletariat's fight against the fat cats. This is a man who is at his most engaging when having a rant against modern society. Yes, he does bang on a little bit too much about the woes of unfettered capitalism when on his fourth IPA of the evening. And he does have an irritating tendency to overuse the word postmodern. But he's usually spot on with what he's got to say. The second of his finest traits is his cordiality. This is a man who is so cordial that on our recent two-man stag do to Portland, he actually managed to out-nice the Americans with polite conversation. And his charm is no more evident than when around people who are significantly older than him. Chris loves nothing more than making small talk with a 50 or 60-something. This is one of the reasons why I didn't hesitate to introduce him to my parents for the first time. He swept my mother off her feet with his banal chit-chat about migraines. And her fondness for Chris lives on to this day. The same is less true for my father, a former headmaster, who for some reason turned cold on Chris the day he joined Ofsted. And so to the final trait, fairness. I'm a reasonable man, get off my case. So go the opening lines to Pack Like Sardines in a Crushed Tin Box by Radiohead. Whenever I hear those lyrics, I think of Chris. He has an obsession for fairness and justice that you rarely see in others. It is an obsession that has seen him rally against many of the perceived injustices in this world. Like that time at Piccadilly Station, when an incorrect platform announcement resulted in us missing the last train home, and he decided to take it up with the station master in a 30-minute long debate. In these situations, Chris always tries to calmly and logically reason with the offending party, but so often it falls on deaf ears. This obsession with fairness is so utterly Chris, and with a few more people like him, our society would be a far better place in which to live. And so, back to the formative days of our relationship. After leaving college, we were cruelly torn apart by Chris's failure to get into his first choice university, Cambridge.
That's not true.
He ended up at Nottingham, and we were now separated by the Norwich to Liverpool Lime Street East Midlands train service, which is equivalent to being separated by the 38th parallel in Korea. However, our bond was strong enough to overcome this, and we would make frequent visits to see one another for weekends that would involve more of the usual. Football stadia, late night FIFA, and standing in corners at nightclubs. So our relationship survived separate universities, but could it survive separate countries? Post-migration saw me emigrate to Japan, where I have remained ever since. But despite being on opposite sides of the world, our relationship continued to flourish, supported by Chris's frequent trips out to Japan. Indeed, some of my happiest memories with Chris were forged during those visits, not least that moonlit night on the island of Yakushima in a hot tub together. But then Caroline came in. It won't last, I thought. Chris had had fumbling dalliances before that had come to nothing. No one was able to recreate what we had. But something about this one smelt different. It started when Chris described me by email as her being actually quite attractive. And when Chris says quite attractive, he means stunningly gorgeous. It got worse when I heard that Caroline's apartment was located within spitting distance of the council house, aka the City of Manchester Stadium. When he said that even the roars emanating from the stadium after a City goal were not enough to extinguish his libido, I knew my place in Chris's heart was under threat. And things turned positively sinister when I learned that she was from Liverpool. Although the situation was redeemed slightly upon hearing that she had no interest whatsoever in football, let alone that rabble from Anfield. Mrs. Rowe.
Too many rants here.
There was a chink of light when I heard that Caroline actually had some flaws. One of these is the ability to waste several hours getting ready in the morning. I would later experience this firsthand in Japan, when, despite having risen at 6 in the morning, we were nearly late for the 11 o'clock train service to Nagano. She also has a lot of rules that she refuses to budge on. No prominent logos on clothes, no excess heat, a different item of clothing for every day of the holiday, tights at all times, and definitely no male chauvinism. But Chris, remember, is a reasonable man, and he was able to tolerate all of this. And so their relationship progressed. Days turned to months, months turned to years. I decided it was time to meet the lady in question and get to know my rival a little better. Our first meeting resulted in few findings, largely because the three of us consumed a significant portion of Bavaria's annual output of Hellas beer that night. However, subsequent meetings gave me an insight into why she had such a hold over him. While others tolerate Chris's foibles, an array of ailments, Caroline positively thrives on them. She lives for them. This is a girl who, as a high school student, wrote that her dream man would have lactose intolerance. This is a girl for whom there is no greater pleasure than squeezing a ripe spot. This is a girl who finds the morning after Chris, with his pedo tash and greasy locks all erect in the style of an alpaca, attractive. And I'm sorry, Chris, but this is one look that even I do not find attractive. Caroline's devotion to Chris is perhaps best summed up by the handle with care notice she sent me before our stag trip to Portland in March. I hope, Caroline, you won't mind if I read out an abridged version and share it with you all today.
As long as it's an abridged version.
It's abridged.
It's a long document.
Okay. So, instructions for the care of the fatty. Fatty being Chris, for those of you who don't know, is one of his many names. So, twice daily eye goo removal manual. Sorry, Caroline, I didn't do this. Feed every 3 hours. Constant supply of war, war being water, for those hard of Caroline and Chris speak. 5:30 to 7 p.m, give alcohol if flagging. That's the thing we can all get behind. Grey equals sit down and food and war. White equals sit down. Squinty equals alcohol. Agitated equals don't speak. Sit down away from people / traffic, brackets noise. No unnecessary walking beyond a mile, no running for trains, no sprinting, no jumping, no carrying baggage for distance, clapping is fine. If you're in a shop and lose each other, Fatty will be outside the front door. If it says it is itchy, take jacket and bags, and wait silently. Orange juice every day. Now, if you ask me, this all sounds like too much hard work, but for Caroline, this is what makes Chris irresistible. So Caroline, I give in. In contrast to Dido, who I'm sure Chris did not want to be referenced on his wedding day, I put up my white flag and I surrender. The best man, or woman, to be politically correct, has won. To you go the spoils. You get the most intellectually stimulating, cordial, and fairest bloke I know. It's a heart-crushing day for me, but I know that with you, Caroline, he is in the very best of hands. I'd like to raise a toast for the two of them. One more drink. Congratulations, Chris and Caroline. Cheers.
Caroline.